Okay, how do you answer the objection, the Bible can be interpreted any way you want to?
Right, well, this happens all the time. You get into a trial, right? And some people come in and say, I saw him walk over and take that apple off that stand, take 2 bites out of it, and put the apple back in the stand. Okay. Well, now, that same person might offer you an interpretation. I think he was just really hungry. I don't want to know what you think. That's not going to be allowed. That's speculating. You're not going to be allowed to get that in trial. You can testify to what you saw him do, but you can't testify to what you think it meant. That's for the jury to decide. You don't get to decide that. Are you in his head? No. So all you're limited to talk about is what you saw him do. Same kind of thing happens here. We can disagree about how we interpret the data. That's not my concern tonight. My concern is, do we have good data? That's what I'm concerned about. And yes, 2 witnesses will see the same thing, and that's okay. There's some non-essentials. If we are in this room, I'll bet you we disagree about a lot of stuff. We do. I'm not going to poll us, but I'll bet you if I was to talk about like eschatology, oh my gosh, end times. I bet you there's like 15 different views in this room and none of us agree. How about this? The age of the earth in Genesis 1. I bet you there's about 1,000 different views of that in this room too. These, and don't even start. Don't even get started. The point I'm trying to make is, though, there are some things that we would say are essentials and some things that we say are not. There is no creed of the church that nails down eschatology as tightly as you might like it to nail down. There's also no creed of the church that talks about the creation week in a particular way that you have to accept or you're not a Christian. Besides which, why would you? I'm concerned about what the text says, not about what some group says the text means. I'm not concerned about that. And let me just say one thing about why we divide as Christians. It drives me crazy. It just really does. And if you, by the way, make the case for Christianity online, we were talking about this earlier, get ready. You're going to get beat up, okay? Because Christians are going to be the ones beating up more than anybody else. It's crazy. But what I look at it is this way. When you're en route to a shots fired call, you're going to drive by a lot of other stuff that you're not going to stop for today, because I'm en route to a shots fired call. I'm going to drive by speeders and parking violations and shoplifters. I'm not stopping for any of that stuff today because I'm en route to a felony. Someone's been shot. I'm going there first. That's the urgency of the call I'm responding to. We're in a culture right now. We're in a shots fired culture. And if we're going to sit around and navel gaze and divide over all this non-essential stuff, when the world doesn't even know anything about Jesus, something's wrong. Amen. Right? So I'm just going to drive by that stuff right now because I'm en route to a shots fired call.
The last word of this question is underlined twice for extra emphasis.
Okay. Yeah, it's got to be serious.
How is the divinity of Christ proven?
Well, the divinity, look, Paul tells us that, right? You want to know what the most important piece of evidence in all of Scripture is related to Jesus' divinity? Paul's going to tell you. It's in 1 Corinthians 15. The one piece of evidence that if we're been lied to about, we're to be pitied. What is that? That's the resurrection. Now, I could have done a talk on the resurrection. I do a whole other talk on why I think that using abductive reasoning, the resurrection, as we see it as Christians, is the most reasonable inference from evidence. But for me, that was huge. If the resurrection is not true, and that is without a doubt the best piece of evidence for the deity of Christ. Now, did he claim to be God? Yeah, he claimed to be God. That's pretty clear. But who cares? Lots of knuckleheads claim to be God. Doesn't mean they're God. Did he rise from the dead? If that happened, that's a game changer. Now, here's the other thing. If you're in this room right now and you just don't think that those kinds of things could happen, I am not going to change your mind. But I want you to think about this for a second. If the investigation you're starting is an investigation to see whether or not the supernatural is reasonable, to see whether or not the supernatural things actually happen, if that's the thing you're investigating, you can't start that investigation with a bias against the supernatural. Do you know what I mean? I remember I talked about this in the book. I had a case where we get to this crime scene, and there's a lady who's dead on the bed. She's half dressed, and my senior partner, who's 15 years senior to me, says, this is going to be a boyfriend-girlfriend murder. Look at her. Look on her nightstand. You got a picture of him with her with some guy. Who's that guy? Look at her closet. Her closet's half empty. All the girls' clothes are packed in, and this side is empty. It's got one men's jacket. What woman has a closet that's half empty? Think about it. You find the guy whose clothes are missing, who's in that picture, that's going to be our killer. We wasted a week looking for her boyfriend when she had no boyfriend. None. That was her brother. She was Korean. It was New Christmas Eve. He went back to Korea, took his clothes and left. She was killed that night when she was by herself after he left. No boyfriend. She was 56 when she died. Now, because we had a faulty assumption, a presupposition, we decided before we started looking what our conclusion was. We decided we're looking for a boyfriend. If you think that up front, you'll spend a lot of time wasting your time. If you decide up front that naturalism is true, that no supernatural events could ever occur, well, trust me, you'll end up there because you started there. You have to suspend your disbelief and put it on the shelf for just a minute to see if this is the most reasonable inference from evidence if I didn't first hold a bias against the supernatural. And then if everything else works for you except that it is supernatural, start to examine whether or not your bias is what's keeping you from that conclusion. That make sense? All right.
Well, we are running a touch late, so we're going to have to make this the last question. My son's world history high school freshman teacher said that the Bible can't be used as a reliable source, and he can't use it in the class for historical sources. Young kids' minds believe what's taught in school. Can you comment on what you would do in this class?
That's a tough one. Tougher in college, I think, actually. Here you are in a class where you got to kind of weigh, do I take a stand or do I jeopardize my GPA? And my son had to do that in a microbiology class. And you have to make a decision about whether you're going to, it's hard when you try to get ready to go to med school, you want the best grades, right? You have to take your MCATs and you have to take your grade, GPA, and all this stuff, your service, what lab you've been serving in, all those things go together to see what med school you're going to get in. Do you really want to jeopardize a third of that by taking a stand in a school? Now you're not going to have a 4.0 anymore. Now you're going to have a 3.78. You're never going to be able to get it above that because this guy gave you a C because you took a stand as a Christian. Tough decision, huh? So I typically will say to people that really this is about tactical engagement. When I'm sitting and talking to a suspect in custody, I'm not trying to get a cop out. I'm not trying to go for home runs. If I get a home run, great. But I'm trying to get singles. If I can demonstrate to the jury that he's a liar, even though he hasn't copped out, that'll go a long way for me. So I want to catch him and ask him questions that I know the answers to, that I know he's going to lie about, because I want the jury to see he's a liar. Then later on, if they go, should you trust this guy? You heard him lie 5 times. Singles, not home runs. That's what I'm trying to do in these engagements with anybody who's a non-believer. I don't need to hit home runs. I need to hit singles. So when a professor says, for the most part, I don't have to even give up my position on what I believe in order to make my point. This is what we talk about. There's a great book out there called Tactics by Greg Kokel, who's a friend of mine. It's a great book. And Greg's a great guy, by the way. And he's got a ministry called Stand to Reason, which I served at for about 1.5 years. I just got so busy I couldn't stay with him. But trust me, if you ever need resources, str.org is a great place to go, too. And I can tell you, this book is wonderful because it teaches you the 2 most important questions you can ever ask in that context. What should you do there? Ask the 2 most important questions of your teacher. What do you mean by that? And why do you think that's true? Or how'd you come to that conclusion? So when someone makes a claim in a class, like this claim, you can't trust the Bible as historical. Well, what do you mean by that you can't trust it? Like, why can't you trust it? Just ask these questions. Because what you're going to you don't have to he made a statement, the teacher made a claim. It's up to the person who makes the claim to defend their claim. You don't have to make a counterclaim. Let's get him to defend his claim first before you make a counterclaim. Because what you're going to discover is, as you ask this person to defend their claim, they really can't defend it. Because they made that claim off the top of their head without any real reason, without any real evidence. We know what the evidence is. So if we're going to get to that point, we say, well, you can't trust it because you won't have a single document until the 3rd century. Well, what document are you talking about? Well, I don't really know the name of the document, but it's a document in the 3rd century. Well, there's a lot of documents in the 3rd century. Which document are you talking about? You just need to back these guys down until they show everyone they don't have any idea what they're talking about. Because we already know, if you do the work, then you do know what you're talking about. you can actually find a way to back them into this exposure without having to ever make a claim about what you believe. So it is about a tactical, I think, assessment of how you approach these topics. Hey, one last thing before we go, I'll let you guys go. For those of you who get frustrated, maybe think about this. Sometimes we think evangelism with our friends who are lost is like a game of tennis. You know, it's hot, the cameras are rolling, it's Wimbledon, you're on clay, it's dusty, you hit the ball, you're just a little bit outside the line. Oh, I messed this up. It's just you and him. Every mistake you make, he gets a point, and you lose the game that way. And that's the way we feel about evangelism, about sharing with our friends. That is not how this works. This is a game of baseball. It's truly a game of baseball. And you're not one-on-one against an opponent. You're part of a very large team called the church. And all of us get a chance to get up to the plate. And my goal is that I want to get my dad hopefully on first. And then I'm going to pray that somebody else can move him to second. And at some point, someone's going to move him to third. And when he's leaning in toward home, who knows, maybe somebody's going to drive him in. I don't know. But I can tell you this, our goal is to get up and make contact. That's it. Don't worry about home runs. Don't swing for the fences. I don't even try for homers with my dad anymore. There's no point in it. It's not going to go anywhere. I want to put a little idea in his head that's going to fester. I want to get him to first base. And by the way, then when you finally do talk to somebody about your faith and they come to Christ right in front of you, you go, oh my gosh, I just brought a guy to Christ. No, you didn't. He was standing on third, leaning in. Somebody else has been working on that guy for 5 years. Dude, give me a break. You know, you got a bunt single and he runs in, you think you got a home run. No, you didn't. That's how the game really works. So here's my encouragement to you. You're going to have a lot of conversations in which all you're going to get is a single, and because you're looking for runs, you're going to get frustrated. I didn't get a run today. No, you did something important because you're part of that process that moves people around bases. Okay? Don't get tired. You may never see the person who drives them in, but somebody will drive them in. Okay? Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.